You're watching Coping with COVID-19. I'm Hayley Woodin, and my guest today, Sean Finn, Executive Vice President of Corporate Services and Chief Legal Officer at CN. Sean, good to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making the time.
Hayley, it's great to be here. It's great to be with your listeners.
So, of course, operating railways an essential service and a critical part of our supply chain here in Canada. How is a company like CN being impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah, Hayley, we're still operating the railway, obviously, so we haven't really slowed down. I mean, we have a bit less traffic from our customers in some areas, but we've been very busy. And you think about the railway as being essential to the Canadian economy, but also, we bring goods from the ports and from manufacturers onto our trains and then into a terminal and a truck, and we bring them to grocery stores and drugstores across North America and in Canada. So obviously we play an important role in making sure that we have what we need on a daily basis in our grocery stores and supermarkets. So our employees are working hard. They can't work from home because obviously you can't run a train or fix a crossing or dispatch a train from the brains of the network in Edmonton at the Rail Traffic Control Center. So our 26,000 employees are all working as we speak and making sure that the railway is providing a safe and healthy environment to our employees to keep on serving our customers and the Canadian economy.
I know some industries and some companies have really had to rethink how they work, where they place workers, ensuring that they're properly physically distanced and things like that. How has CN maybe had to change how it works, if at all?
Yeah, well, there's 5,000 employees are working from home. That's a big change, obviously, because the other 20,000 are on the railway, making sure we run the trains. Obviously, we are respecting self-distancing. Relatively easy to do in a yard, but think about a cab of a locomotive where you have a conductor and an engineer side by side, like a pilot in an airplane. They're about 6 feet apart. Those two seats in the locomotive cab are 6 feet apart. But we've had to make sure that the locomotives are sanitized, that we also set up our own sanitizing production line in Montreal, Edmonton, and Homewood, Illinois, in the U.S. to produce hand sanitizers that we're shipping to our crews who are working on the trains. We have to make sure that our train crews often stay in bunkhouses, either in northern BC or in Jasper, for example. Make sure the bunkhouses have been sanitized to a very high level, and also any hotels they might be living in. So we've had to make sure that to provide a safe and healthy environment, we have to take extra steps to make sure that's the case. And I must say, we've been successful. It's been almost 10 weeks now that we've been operating the railway under these new conditions, and we've had very few cases of COVID-19. Probably it's a good sign that if you plan well and you make sure that the employees understand what the restrictions are, you can make sure that you keep the cases down to a certain level. And we've had no major flare-ups anywhere in the system. And when we do have an odd case, the employee stays home. We are testing our employees as they all walk into facilities, and we're insisting that employees now for a week all wear masks when they work, if they're working in an environment where they cannot self-distance.
All best practices sounds like being advocated by health authorities across the country and around the world. Has there been any noticeable shift in how goods are transported? So, for example, maybe companies now needing to rely on railways because another mode of transportation isn't available to them?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say there's I'm not seeing an uptick in that area, but probably we have seen a lot of movement of grain. But think about the fact also intermodal containers, right? They are used to ship consumer goods, be it hand sanitizers, chemicals for plants that have been reopening, fruits and vegetables that goes, like I said, to our grocery stores. I think we're seeing that the domestic movement of containers remains strong. So we're moving these containers, from market, Western Canada to the east and vice versa. And, I wouldn't be surprised you're seeing some customers with increased shipments of their product in some areas using containers, and therefore becoming new customers on the railway, because containers are, they go by a truck from the manufacturer or the distributor's dock onto a train, onto a truck, getting to a terminal, down to a train, and then to destination and back on a truck. You might not see the trains in between, but they're very active.
Of course, you mentioned grain, so I'll ask you a question about that. It looks like CN had a very good first quarter for Western Canadian grain. What does that tell you, either about the economy or any other sector, about how we're performing here?
Yeah, I think, Hayley, we had a very good first quarter in grain, record moves in grain, and then April was a very strong month. And we measure our success by how many cars we spot a week. And our target right now is build a spot on an elevator to be loaded with grain 5,500 cars a week. Last Saturday night, for the week ending last Saturday, we spotted 7,800 cars. So it gives you an idea, almost
Wow.
2,000 more cars than our target, which means that, the farmers are delivering grain to the grain elevators. They're elevating the grain into our rail cars. We're moving the cars from the elevators to the Port of Vancouver, or the Port of Prince Rupert, for example, and they're being unloaded effectively, and then the empties are being sent back to the prairies. That's the definition of how the supply chain works. But I must say, if we're moving all these cars, it's because the supply chain, which is a team sport, is working very effectively for the benefit of both Canadian farmers. But this wheat, some is being exported, but some is being milled into flour. And I guess with the increase of stress baking, there's a bigger demand on flour in Canada than normally is the case. And probably that's why we're moving more grain.
I was going to ask you about that. All the at-home sourdough kits or the stress baking, is that a factor? Perhaps, I guess.
Perhaps. I guess that's going to the mills from the mills as flour, but there's no doubt the farmers are moving the product. And, farmers play an important role in our economy. So the fact that some of them are doing well, having the grain move is important. But, there's still challenges for many other farmers in Western Canada. I think about the hog farmers and the beef farmers. They're going through challenges, and we support them as we go forward.
Absolutely. Any areas where this pandemic has highlighted how our supply chains could be made more resilient? Any lessons learned at this point?
Yeah, no, I think that it's done well, the supply chain in Canada. We've ensured, obviously, food security and other basic products. I think we have, there was a bit of a run on them early on in this pandemic, but I think we've since, with the supply chain, redeployed the shelves or filled the shelves in the various areas. I think our biggest challenge here will be going forward. And we all know that, when you look at a supply chain, it's only as strong as its weakest link. And we've had some challenges, both in Vancouver, less so in Prince Rupert, in making sure that the infrastructure that accesses the port can meet the demand. So I think, as we go through this pandemic and get ready for the recovery, hopefully, in Q3 or early Q4, that, we'll use this downtime to, make sure we make the investments, we as CN, but also the federal government and elsewhere, the ports, to make sure that the ports are well equipped. And any bottlenecks we saw before have been, they won't all be fixed in one summer, but it's a good time this summer as we have a bit less traffic on the railway or on our ports to invest to make sure the infrastructure is ready when this economy starts up again and when goods start coming through the Port of Vancouver at the levels they were before, hopefully.
Absolutely. Any concerns about, say, the global recession, the slowing down globally, how that impacts trade and how that potentially impacts volume for CN?
Yeah, obviously, we've seen a pretty constant movement during March. The quarter ended not too badly. April's a bit weaker, and we expect May to also have a bit of a weakness. And don't forget, it comes from our customers. So when you talk about trade, what's important here is that our customers are going through very difficult times. Some are slowed down, some have layoffs, and as the federal government is deploying support to these businesses, they're trying to continue to operate and to manufacture their goods. And I think you'll probably see a change in where some goods are produced, which will have an impact, obviously, on the supply chain going forward. So depending on where goods are produced and how they get to destination, we'll have to make sure that our domestic supply chain remains very strong. But also, if goods are changing marketplaces and the flows change, we have to adapt also with our customers and our supply chain partners. Think of the ports and the overseas shippers. So I think we're watching it closely. We're trying to remain nimble and try not to miss any opportunities. Obviously, this is a very difficult time for all of us in Canada, but it's important that everybody at CN, and we're focused this way, if customers have demands or requests, that we're able in a very nimble and quick fashion to fill their orders and make sure we move their goods to destination.
Sean, a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hayley, always a pleasure, and I wish to you and all your listeners that you all remain safe and healthy, and that we have a chance to get through this together. And sometime over the summer, hopefully we see the economy pick up to a level where we can start thinking about the future in a more positive fashion.
Well said. That's Sean Finn, Executive Vice President of Corporate Services and Chief Legal Officer at CN. I'm Hayley Woodin. This is Coping with COVID-19. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with another video tomorrow.